Hey everyone, it's Jordan from the Be Present team. And today, during Mental Health Awareness Week, we're here to talk about how to support a friend who might be going through some stuff. And I am honored to be here with my special guest and younger sister, Emma. So thank you, Emma, for being here.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It's nice to see your face again.
Yes, I know. It's so crazy. Like even, if you've been in quarantine, you probably are missing your friends, your family. I know I haven't seen my sister like face to face in months, which is
In
crazy.
a long time.
A long time. So today, again, we're here to talk about like mental illness in general and how it affects so many young people, especially like Emma and I were talking, the pressure to get good grades, to like meet certain standards and expectations, it's higher than ever. And so here at Be Present, our team is really committed to, first and foremost, like strengthening the support network for young adults with cancer. But beyond that, it's just raising awareness about how to be there for a friend when they're going through a tough time. And mental illness is a tough time. So before we get started, I just want to like set the context of the fact that like I've struggled with mental illness. Emma, like you've struggled with some stuff. Do you want to talk about that really briefly?
Yeah, so sometimes I feel really down when I don't get invited to social events, or sometimes when I'm at social events, I get anxiety, or if I'm in school and I don't complete things on time, I get anxiety, or family issues can make me really sad inside. So those are some of the things that I've struggled with personally.
Okay, that makes so much sense. And like you're not alone. I've been there. I remember, gosh, high school, college, just like feeling like so focused on just the day to day and not really seeing the big picture of life sometimes.
Mhm.
And that can get really depressing at times because you're like, is this it? Like, and I know especially for so many in quarantine right now who felt their sense of identity like stripped from them, right? Like we were talking, your friends are missing out on like really important stuff like prom, graduation. Like, can talk about that for a second.
Yeah, so being a part of ASB, it's always been a big thing. Prom has actually, we start planning for it a year before, and I have so many friends that were so excited to go, and they were planning for it for so long, and now it's just so sad that they can't attend it, and it's really a bummer.
Well, it's such a bummer too, because I think in high school, in college, and just as a young adult, you have these milestones in your life. And this is why, like, our work at Be Present with young adults with cancer, it's like a cancer diagnosis completely disrupts all milestones.
Mm-hmm.
But even if you're a young adult who hasn't been diagnosed with cancer, even if you're going through some stuff right now, anybody who says that like they're not going through something right now, I personally think like that maybe not true because this is
Yeah.
this is a tough time. So when I want to like talk about when you're going through a tough time, like when you're experiencing that anxiety, that depression, like everyone deals differently, right? So like what does that look like for you?
For me, personally, when I get anxiety, I like to take a breath and just sit down and close my eyes. And I've also heard it's called the 5 steps, or the 5 things that you see, or the five
The
things,
five things. I love it. The five things.
five something. You have to look for one thing that you can see. You look for one thing that you can smell. You look for one thing that you can touch. And you look for, okay,
See,
wait.
smell, touch. Ooh, maybe like, oh, it's like the five senses, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so let's see. We have
Oh,
smell, we have
here. Here.
here. Oh, that's a good one.
Yeah.
Taste.
Taste. Well, you don't really want to be tasting anything. Okay, maybe let's do like the 4 things.
I love it. I would
Okay.
say five though, because like when I get anxious, I'm like cookies. I want to taste cookies.
I know, but like if you're in a weird situation, you're like, what's something I can taste?
Well, I think yes. So I love those ways to get grounded though, and that's really
Mhm.
important. But like when you're anxious, do you find yourself like wanting to reach out to friends or do you really like go inward? Like what does that look like?
Well, it definitely depends on the situation. More when it's based on like family anxiety, I more want to close in because I always feel bad with like bothering people with my own problems because they have their stuff going on. And it's honestly, it's a tough situation because most people do that. And it's really hard sometimes to actually get the help when you want it, but you're too afraid to ask for it.
Yeah, and it makes total sense. And that's really like, thank you for that context because I think it's really helpful for people listening to know kind of like our stories and where we come from. I've struggled with depression, struggled with really, really dark periods of time where like I didn't think my life was worth it. And like that can be a really scary place. But
Mhm.
today we're here to talk about how to support a friend that might be going through that. And, like you, like me, so we often like retreat and we like go inward and we feel like a burden. We feel like we don't want to bother people with our problems. But as you know, because you're a really good friend, it's like if your friend was going through that, like if you put yourself in the shoes of your friend and you're like, if they were experiencing that, you would want to just wrap them up with so much love and support, right?
Mhm.
And so today, I think it would be helpful for us to, before we get into how to support a friend who's going through really tough times, who's struggling with mental illness, struggling with mental health, maybe we can talk about like, how does somebody know if say their friend isn't reaching out for support? Like, what are ways that you think maybe that they can like, kind of tell if their friend's struggling?
Well, that is a tough question because some people come about it in a different way. I've had friends who are going through a hard time, yet they seem completely normal and they're happy and they're energetic, just like a normal like child would be, but they're still going through a hard time. And I've had friends who are really closed off and they're sad all the time and the known effects or
Yeah, like the symptoms, like the
the
signs.
symptoms of like depression, so that's a tough situation. I think it more depends on like the person that you're talking to about this. You have to really get their input, and some people you have to get deep down into what they're feeling for it to actually show.
And I think that starts with just being there, right? It's
Yeah.
so, sometimes we make it so complicated in our heads where we think, like, oh, I'm not an expert. Like, I don't know how to talk to them. Like, I'm not a professional, but you're their friend. So the first step is just showing up and creating that space and saying, hey, I'm here for you. I feel like this could be me and my perception, but I feel like you've been acting a little bit off. And I just want to let you know that, like, if you want to talk, I'm here.
Yeah. I also think I love that. But I also think that just being there for anyone, because like I was saying with the people that don't even come off like weirdly, you should just text your friend occasionally and say, "Hey, how are you doing?" and like really get to know them because sometimes people aren't going to show what they're feeling. So if you just reach out in the first place, even if they seem fine, you might be surprised with what you're hearing back.
Yeah, that's so important. And I think we're so eager to get into like the bulk of this conversation, which is how to support a friend who's going through a tough time. But
Mhm.
if you're like me and you want some actual tangible like signs that maybe aren't so obvious that your friend's going through some stuff, I have some really like tangible things that you can look out for. So maybe they're talking about feeling hopeless. Maybe they're self-isolating. In this time of literal isolation, maybe they're not responding to your texts or they don't really want to hop on a FaceTime like they maybe usually would have before all of this happened. Perhaps maybe they started like taking drugs or drinking more. I know in high school, college, it's a time to experiment, and we get that, but there's a time and place where people use substances to cope, and that can be really unhealthy. Of course, if they're harming themselves and they open up to you about that, that's like clear red flag that you get to come in and help to a certain extent, and then also consult the help of medical professionals. So If perhaps even something like they don't feel like hanging out as much, maybe you're talking about plans for the future and things you're excited to do when this quarantine lifts, and maybe they're just not about it. They're feeling like, meh, like, I don't know what the future holds. If their mind seems to be somewhere else, maybe they're zoning out a lot in conversations. They just can't stay present in the moment, or maybe that looks like being so anxious that they can't relax, that they're like going a million miles a minute trying to do all the things because they feel like that'll help kind of fill the void of whatever else they're feeling. Again, if they're just not acting like themselves, like, you get to trust. I know sometimes, and Emma and I, we talk about this, but as a young adult, sometimes you're told by your parents, like, oh, you're still a kid, like, you're not 18 yet, like, you don't know what you're talking about. You totally know what you're talking about. If you feel like something is off with your friend, you get to trust your gut, trust your instincts, and just reach out to them. Two more things: if they're more irritable than usual, if they, you're having a conversation with them and they just kind of like flip out, that could have nothing to do with you. So you get to take it again, trust yourself, be like, whoa, this is a little abnormal. Like, maybe instead of retreating and kind of like freaking out about their reaction, that's when you get to lean in and support them. Or the last one that I have for you, if again you're looking for signs that your friend might be struggling with mental health, is if they're taking more risks than usual. Maybe that's like big crazy purchases, or just doing things that might be dangerous and harmful, but they don't realize it. So I hope those were helpful. What do you think, Emma?
Yes, no,
Did I
I
miss
totally
any?
love those. No, those sound awesome. One that I could really relate to was the lashing out.
Mhm.
I've had family troubles at home that have followed me to school, and if I get a bad grade on a test, or if my friend says something that usually could just slightly annoy me, I would just lash out and I'd get so mad. So I want people to know that that's normal and that's okay. And if your friend's doing that, it's not because they're mad at you, and it's not because you're actually doing something wrong. It's just because they might be going through something that's making them feel this way.
I think that's such an important reminder, because oftentimes as friends, we feel like if our friend lashes out, we're like, oh, they want space and we should leave them alone. When in reality, sometimes it means that we get to lean in closer.
Totally, totally. Yeah, it's honestly hard because people always back up when they get like when someone gets hurt. You don't want to involve yourself with that, and you're kind of just, hey, like, I don't want to disrupt you any longer. But the best thing is to actually be there for them, because they don't want to be mean to you.
Mhm.
It's just sometimes it happens.
Yeah, totally. Okay, so now we get to talk about, like, how do you be there for a friend who's going through, we identified all the ways that potentially could be signs that your friend's going through some stuff. And now if you're like, oh, so-and-so in my life seems to be struggling, now how do you reach out to them? What does that look like?
Well, I think a big thing is consistency. Even the smallest things can make a huge impact if you're consistent with it. If you know your friend's going through a hard time, just checking in like every couple days can really make a big difference. Like, I have had friends who have gone through hard times, and they said it really made them feel better when they got that text from me that was like, "Hey, how are you doing?" And I think that the phrase "how are you doing" has become so normalized that everyone responds, "I'm fine," or "I'm tired." But in reality, you have to double back and say, "How are you really doing?" I
Totally.
think that can make a big difference.
Because everyone's going to just say fine. I mean, we've been so conditioned to just say fine. And I mean, for anyone listening who actually wants to kind of like test that too, if somebody says, obviously, don't say you're doing horribly unless you're kind of going through something. But the next time your friend asks you how you're doing, like, take a pause and answer authentically and honestly. If you're doing really great, amazing, like, share that with them. But if you're in a position where you're like, actually, today kind of sucks, like, just say that and see their reaction. Because I know in my life with my friends, they're always taken aback. They're like, wait, what? Like, because people are so normal, like, so
Yeah.
used to just saying fine.
hmm That's so true. Every time, and even I'm guilty of it. Every time someone asks me, "How are you doing?" I usually say, "I'm fine," or "I'm tired," or "I'm okay." but it's really important to actually open up to people about how you're really feeling.
Yeah. And that's why I love those follow-up questions too, of like, even if you said, oh, I'm tired, like, why are you tired? Like digging deeper, right? Like, oh, like what's going on? You know, did you stay up late doing something? Like, was it fun or was it a homework thing? And if your friends, you know, pulling all-nighters to get their stuff done, it's like, okay, like what's underneath that? Like, do you feel like everything has to be perfect? Are you putting a lot of pressure on yourself? And I just think asking, one of the things that's been really helpful for in my life for being there for my friends is asking like open-ended questions that usually can't be answered with like a yes or a no, right? Just to
Yeah.
dig deeper.
Yeah, no, that's so true. I love I I mean, most times I don't really feel like opening up to people, but when I do open up to people, it honestly feels like something's been lifted off my shoulders because it's nice to talk about how you feel sometimes.
Totally. Well, and it's nice too. I think a few things that hitting on here is like also when your friend gives you the space to or when you give your friend the space to share and then they take you up on it, it's, you know, re-emphasizing that you're not going to judge them. You're not going to pressure them into telling you something, right? Like you were talking about how so often or just friends in general, not your friends are amazing, but friends in general are like, no, please just tell me, just tell me. Like, what does that look like and how does that feel?
Well, so that's actually something I've been dealing with is one of my friends is going through a really hard time, but she's really closed off. And so I think the biggest thing is to be there for them, but to an extent. When you ask them how they feel and they say okay, you don't need to keep pushing and pushing and pushing to wonder what they're thinking or how they're feeling. You just need to let them know that you're there for them when they are eventually ready to talk.
And that brings me to a really important next step of letting them take the lead, like creating that space, letting them know that you're there, being consistent. Like you said, consistency is key and consistently showing up for them, but allow them to take the lead, right? To invite you into that really personal space. I think another thing, and let me know what you think about this, but how about like trying to fix their problems? Like you and I are both problem solvers. We love supporting other people. But in the end of the day, like you have to go into supporting a friend who's going through mental health issues with the knowledge that like you're not going to fix it for them. And you're not in the position to offer professional like medical advice either, right?
Yeah. No, I think that's honestly hard for me and you personally because when we see a friend hurt, or many people when they see a friend hurt, they want to be there for them, and sometimes they think being there for them means they have to fix it for them, but in many cases you can't fix it for them. It's something that they need to personally take a step back or a step forward to really fix this problem for themselves, but that doesn't mean that you can't help them along the way by being there for them and asking them how they feel.
Mm-hmm. And so it's really like, don't demand answers from them or force them to say anything because it's really like their own healing journey. It's really about their process for opening up.
Mhm.
Um, and if it gets to the point where, you know, again, you're trying and trying and trying, like don't get defeated. Just treat them as a friend. Everyone goes through stuff. And that's the thing too, I think with Be Present, one of the biggest things we realize and recognize is that when somebody gets diagnosed with cancer, you look at them completely differently. And it's like, what the heck? It's still the same person. And same thing, like if your friends, you know, struggling with depression, struggling with anxiety, these are just two of like the very common mental health conditions that we see. But of course, you know, anything from bipolar to suicidal stuff, like it's all very real and happening, you know, alongside of so many of us in our communities and friend groups. So you're not alone. But knowing that when your friend gets diagnosed with something, like it doesn't change them as a person. So just being there in the friend capacity is the best thing you can do.
Yes, no, I could not agree with that more. Having a friend who actually has cancer, you notice that everything else in their life is changing. Their school is changing, the way their parents treat them is changing. Everything is changing. So they don't need you to also change how they're acting. They need to have that one thing constant, which is a friend.
Mm-hmm. And that goes with like mental health too. And I think the reason that Be Present during this week is really, talking about how to support a friend with mental health is because mental health is invisible. And a lot of times people walk around and they're really struggling, but they don't like wear it outwardly, right? They can't really, there's no way to tell that they're struggling with these things. And with cancer, like your physical stuff changes as well, but that takes a huge toll on your mental health. Like every young adult that we've worked with who has gone through a cancer diagnosis, treatment and recovery, like and remission, amazing stories, they'll tell you it's a transformational process and it's significantly affected their mental health, the way that they look at the world. And so I think if we could give one piece of advice, may sound cliche, but it's simple. It's like, be there, show up consistently, and don't put pressure on yourself to say the right thing, do the right thing, bring the right like it's all perfect. Just you as a friend, like you're enough. Like you are so valuable.
Yeah, like don't be nervous to approach someone with how they're feeling. Like just by approaching them, it's already going to make them feel better. Like even having my friends just say, "Hey, what's up?" sometimes it's really awesome.
Absolutely. Okay, so I have four ways to once I know we just went through a lot. But 4 ways to keep checking in, to keep like that consistency going that we talked about. So 1, keep invitations coming. Oftentimes it's so easy when we invite them to something like a party or a Zoom chat in today's day and age, right? And they don't show up. It's like, oh man, maybe they didn't want to come. Maybe you're feeling rejected because they didn't accept your invitation. Again, has nothing to do with you. So keep the invitations going. That's 1. 2 is handle your friend's trust with care. If your friend does choose to open up to you, like be really, really conscientious and cognizant of the fact that they're allowed into that really beautiful space where they're giving you permission to get, up close and personal with them in their life. That's not something that you should take lightly. And that trust that you formed is so beautiful. And so make sure to not, go out and gossip and share it with other people. Of course, and this is number 3, if you need to get outside help from medical professionals, from adults that you know and you trust. If your friend opens up to you about potentially harming themselves or others, that's a situation where that trust, that you formed with them, that one-on-one trust, you're still handling it with care because you're making sure that they're getting the support that they need. And then 4, and this goes right back to consistency, is don't give up. Like you are so important. Your presence in their life is so valuable. And so if your texts aren't working or you perceive that they're not kind of moving the needle as much as you'd like, just know that it still matters. Like Emma, would you say that when you were going through like really tough times, even getting a text and maybe if you didn't respond to it, like it still mattered to you?
Definitely. Honestly, Jordan knows I'm bad at responding to text, but even just like seeing it pop up on my phone even just made me happier.
Yeah, I love it. So that's anything else that we didn't cover today around how to be there for a friend who's struggling?
No, I think we covered it all. I actually got a lot out of this talk.
I'm glad, me too. I'm like, y'all, we were winging it. No, I'm kidding. We are so, just a little bit, so thankful that you took the time to join us today for this conversation, because honestly, it shows that you are a valuable member of your friend's support network, or perhaps you're the one who is struggling and you need support. So hopefully today's conversation gave you insight into the ways in which your friends might be reaching out to you. And so whatever position you're in, we hope that these tips and tricks were valuable and insightful. And we encourage you, as always, just to be there, know that your presence is enough, and to, open up to those around you with how you're doing, just consistently showing up because you matter. So thank you so much.
Thank you guys.